Fights are almost inevitable, so be a mature fighter. There have been some false rendered versions of tales about the perfect love told in the past and voiced in our present. One of the most significant is the fantasy that amidst true love with understanding people, there are never any disputes, fights, no quarrels. In the light of a greater wisdom, this proclamation is found to be erroneous. Humans experience a multiplicity of love types and variations with many different persons or subjects throughout our short lifetimes. Namely, the love towards family, with its own internal variations and intensity levels, with respect to any of the subjects concerned. Next is the love towards a true and loyal friend, the love of animals, specifically towards a dear pet, and the intimate love towards one of the opposite gender. All of the aforementioned existent love types have their individual and varying unique placements and/or time of occurrence in our lives, although all may not be experienced by everyone, especially in the event where contact with a subject a particular love type is to be directed towards isn't available, found, and/or achieved. Some perfect examples could be one who never acquires a pet or decides never to get intimate with anyone. Whether or not all the cited are realized, there is one love type which will generally in most cases be experienced and be first for all beings, and that is none other than the love towards family, or one who is viewed and honored as family for taking up the associated responsibilities of a natural family, thereby achieving a family-like bond. Thus, by implication, such subjects can be deemed family by virtue of duty, love, and sacrifice. For family, irrespective of size or biological link, is our first ever love encounter, hence projection. And the feeling of love in this case can many times feel generally strongly unconditional. The point I hope to bring out with this is the fact that despite the immense feeling of love towards the aforesaid category, we sometimes get offended by dear and beloved subjects within our families. But for the sake of peace and avoidance of open shame or stain to the family name and or repute, we are ready to overlook, optimistically persevere, and overcome emotions that may lead to negative outbursts. The second key factor is because of its almost unconditional nature, more often brought about by a strong feeling of love, stemming from years of presence and involvement, as opposed just a mere decision to have it so. In most cases, force is won in conflict situations to quickly quench the fire of rage and speedily truncate the duration of the feeling of hurt, or vengeful intent and imaginations, particularly in mild to medium scale offenses. Thus, if offense be possible within the family, love projection category, which generally in standard cases of due obligation was once charged with the responsibility of our protection, nourishment, education, care, and love, while we were still tender, defenseless, and fragile, then it is wishful and somewhat irrational thinking to expect otherwise in a union with one most likely raised differently, in a different environment, situation, and or circumstances, under a roof that probably subscribed to fairly different or wildly conflicting or opposing ideologies, patterns, or standards. For we are all unique beings, and despite closeness in rationale, conviction, and or reasoning in some, slight variations must occur between persons or groups that were either incepted in or influenced by personal distinct experiences with respect to any varying influencing factors thinkable. For even subtle impacts yield subtleties, which distinguishes subjects with respect to mannerism, mentality, and more. Thus, this is why we oft hear pronunciations like, "they are quite similar," or This is the only difference between them. Even identical twins will show some difference in pathology, physiological morphology, personalities, or core mindsets. Although, on the surface, because of socialized close familiarities and associations, they may seem exactly the same in manner and or appearance. But examining deeper will eventually unveil the superficially concealed intricacies that tell them apart. Thus, this brings me to the subject of being a mature fighter. Imagine if we treated our new family with the same sensitivity and care as the family we hailed from. Imagine what a blessing it would be for two parties in a relationship deciding to be the bigger man, oriented in the aforesaid mindset whenever quarrels and or fights break out. Mature minds always value their relationships and thus make intentional efforts to fight less with minimal quarrels. And when they do dispute among each other, they oft find themselves intently replaying remorsefully the contentions in their minds to see whether their actions or reactions at any point in time was overdone or irrational. Thus, they do not dwell on the faults of the other, a thought process that brings further discord. Minds that are able to come to this point quicker, absent grudge, before destruction, escalation, and or disruption ensues, keep relationships the longest. Persons with this sort of mind in a union oft simultaneously find themselves launching apologies at each other unplanned, irrespective of who is at fault. People who practice and do this never have hard and fierce arguments. They appreciate and love themselves the more, for they recognize the mutual willingness to step down, sacrificing pride on the altar of ego, for the peace and continual growth of their relationship. This mature action creates more understanding, mutual respect, and a strong desire to never offend. Thus, it is evident that maturity is the foundation that creates the love, respect, and understanding that lessens and almost annihilates conflicts. And even if from time to time disagreements may occur, it is never hot but warm. Thus, by virtue of the deeds or representing actions of maturity, peace is easily restored. This is no different from two good friends respecting each other's boundaries and limits because they value their friendship in a mature mind. In these cases previously elaborated, disputes are without the sting that poisons and kills, nor the fire that burns and consumes, but has rather been so disarmed by intentional and conscious maturity, so that such oppositions can be considered and or appear as great debates in a mutually loving and respectful tone, by two powerful and wise opponents on crucial topics, having opposing ideologies on particular subject matters that may arise from time to time. Two parties whose power is in the strength of knowledge, never in a raised, violent, or disrespectful tone. Partners expressing and defending their own views on a subject matter with the loving intent that the other sees the light of reason in the argumentative points brought forth. Such expressions of opposing views are never viewed, perceived, or portrayed as disputes, but rather as healthy debates. One whose arguments are keenly heard, carefully received and tended to by the other. These debates are never in the light of a school debate, with the sole purpose to win, vanquishing the other in order to obtain the victor's prize, but rather they are more like that of a standard mature and civil-minded General Assembly's debates, purposed towards establishing amicable and feasible laws for collective growth, peace, and the overall well-being of the nation, in this case, their union and or the family. But sadly, living in an individualistic-minded and selfish generation, with the need to be always right, consistently playing the insensitive victim card, always only about me, myself, and I, we are faced with many with an expectance always of the other taking the step to plead, as opposed swallowing their egos. Never argue to defeat or shame your partner, for he or she will be the same person you will wake up to the next day. How do you then face or love yourselves again as before, after damning and heart-rending utterances have been made?